November the 2nd, 1944. Vosges Mountains, France. Hauptmann Friedrich Steiner lowered his binoculars and laughed. A harsh sound that carried across the frozen valley between German and American positions. Through the magnified lenses, he'd been watching an American soldier clean his rifle. The soldier moved with deliberate care, methodical precision, treating the weapon like it was something sacred. What made Steiner laugh wasn't the care. It was the soldier himself. Dark skin, high cheekbones, long hair tied back beneath a helmet that looked too large. An Indian. A savage from the American West, given a rifle and told to fight modern war. Steiner turned to his second-in-command, Oberleutnant Werner Braun, and gestured across the valley with contempt dripping from his voice. They send us children and savages now. Look at him. Probably thinks that rifle is a magic stick. Probably prays to it before battle. Braun chuckled, his breath steaming in the November cold. The Americans are desperate. They've scraped the bottom of the barrel. Indians, Negroes, criminals released from prison. This is what stands between us and victory. Steiner raised the binoculars again, studying the American soldier more closely. The man was alone, positioned in a shallow depression behind a fallen tree, about 800 meters distant. Good position, Steiner admitted grudgingly. Good cover, good sight lines, good fields of fire. But the man himself looked primitive. A hunter playing soldier. What do you think he's shooting at? Braun asked. Rabbits? Maybe he thinks this is a hunting trip. The other officers within earshot laughed. There were 5 of them gathered in the command post, a reinforced bunker overlooking the valley. Major Klaus Hoffmann, battalion commander. Hauptmann Steiner, company commander. Oberleutnant Braun, Lieutenant Hans Fischer, Lieutenant Otto Kessler. All veteran officers. All survivors of the Eastern Front where real war was fought. This American sector was supposed to be quiet. A rest area. Recovery time before the coming offensive. None of them knew they were being watched. None of them understood that the man they mocked was reading them like a book written in their own arrogance. Counting them. Memorizing their ranks by the insignia visible through a scope far more powerful than Steiner's binoculars. Planning. The Apache Marksman's name was Jack Peshlakai. Private First Class, 45th Infantry Division. Full-blooded Apache from the White Mountain Reservation in Arizona. 23 years old. Soft-spoken to the point of silence. Quick to smile among friends. Invisible among strangers. Before the war, Jack had been a hunter. Not for sport, for survival. His family had lived on reservation land that the U.S. government had designated as worthless. Rocky, arid, populated by game that knew every trick of survival. To hunt there meant patience measured in days, not hours. It meant reading wind patterns, understanding animal behavior, becoming part of the landscape so completely that deer would walk within feet without detecting human presence. Jack had killed his first deer at age 7 with a rifle his grandfather had owned since before the First World War. A bolt-action Springfield that kicked like a mule and required perfect shot placement, because there was no money for wasted ammunition. His grandfather had taught him the old ways, not just how to shoot, but how to see, how to read the invisible language of the natural world, how to become patience itself. The Army had taken Jack in 1943, trained him for 8 weeks at Fort Benning, and shipped him to Europe with thousands of other replacements. His marksmanship scores had been perfect. Not good. Perfect. Every qualification, every test, every practice range. Perfect scores that his drill instructors initially assumed were clerical errors until they watched him shoot. The Army designated him as a marksman, gave him a specially selected M1 Garand with a scope, and attached him to a rifle company as a designated sharpshooter. Not officially a sniper. The Army didn't call them snipers yet. That would come later. But the role was the same. Eliminate high-value targets. Disrupt enemy operations. Create fear. Jack had been in France for 6 weeks. In that time, he'd taken 47 confirmed kills. German soldiers never saw him. Never heard the shot that killed them. Never knew they were being hunted until the bullet arrived. His company commander, Captain Robert Harrison, had written 3 commendation letters. Recommended Jack for sniper school, for promotion, for recognition. But Jack didn't care about recognition. He cared about the work. About bringing his skills, learned through necessity on hard land, to this different kind of hunting, where the game shot back, where patience was measured in hours instead of days because the enemy wouldn't wait, where every shot mattered, not just for survival of his family, but survival of his unit, his friends, his brothers in arms. Through his scope, Jack watched the German officers laugh, watched them point in his direction, watched them mock. He could read lips well enough to know they were talking about him, could see the contempt in their body language, the casual dismissal. Jack didn't feel anger. Anger made hands shake. Anger ruined shots. Instead, he felt something colder, more patient. The same feeling he got when tracking a deer that had eluded him for days. The certainty that eventually, patience wins. Eventually, the quarry makes a mistake. Eventually, the hunter gets his shot. He took out his field notebook, a small weathered book where he recorded observations, wind patterns, German routines, officer movements, everything that might matter. He sketched the command post, noted the positions of the 5 officers he could see, marked their ranks by their insignia. 1 major, 2 captains, 2 lieutenants, high-value targets, the kind that disrupted operations when removed, the kind that created chaos in command structures, the kind that the Army specifically wanted eliminated. Jack noted the time. 1400 hours. Noted the weather. Clear. Cold. Wind from the northwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. Noted the distance. 780 meters by his estimation. A long shot, but well within his capability. But not yet. Not while they were alert, gathered, watching. Patience. He watched for 3 hours as the sun moved across the sky and the temperature dropped. Watched as the German officers eventually tired of mocking the distant American and returned to their duties. Watched as they dispersed one by one, back to their individual command posts and positions. He watched as Hauptmann Steiner, the one who'd laughed loudest, walked alone back toward the bunker at the rear. Confident stride, no hurry, no concern. Why would there be? He was 800 meters behind friendly lines, surrounded by his own troops, safe. Jack tracked him through the scope, calculated wind, distance, elevation. The bullet would drop approximately 6 feet at this range. The wind would push it right by about 8 inches. He'd need to aim high and left, hold his breath, squeeze slowly, follow through. But he didn't shoot, not yet, because taking out 1 officer would alert them, would make them cautious, would make the next shot harder. Jack was thinking bigger, planning bigger. His grandfather had taught him that a good hunter doesn't just kill 1 deer. A good hunter manages the herd, takes the weak, the sick, the ones whose removal strengthens what remains. But a great hunter understands the landscape itself, understands that sometimes the best hunting comes from patience that spans not just hours or days, but seasons. Jack was going to teach these officers a lesson about mockery, about dismissing people they didn't understand, about assuming that primitive meant inferior. He was going to eliminate every officer who'd laughed at him, methodically, precisely, one by one until the survivors understood what it meant to be hunted by someone who'd learned patience in a land that killed the impatient. 7 officers within this sector. He'd counted them over the past week, tracked their movements, learned their routines, understood their patterns. 7 men who commanded approximately 400 German soldiers. 7 men whose removal would create chaos that would echo for months. Jack packed up his position, moved silently back through American lines, and reported to Captain Harrison. Harrison looked up from his desk as Jack entered the command tent. The captain was tired, perpetually exhausted from managing a company that was understrength and overworked. Peshlakai, report. Jack's voice was quiet, steady. Sir, I've identified 7 German officers in this sector. 5 gathered at the command post at grid reference. He provided the coordinates. 2 more at forward positions. I request permission to engage. Harrison studied the map. 7 officers? That's their entire command structure in this subsector. If you take them out, you'll cause significant disruption. Yes, sir. How long will it take? Jack considered. 1 week. Maybe less if opportunities present. Harrison leaned back. 1 week to eliminate 7 officers. That's ambitious, Private. I'll get it done, sir. Harrison looked at Jack with something like wonder. He'd seen the young Apache's work. Seen the results. Bodies found by German patrols with single shots through the head or heart. Never any sign of where the shot came from. Never any pattern that could be anticipated or defended against. Just death arriving without warning. Permission granted. You'll coordinate with Lieutenant Brooks. He'll provide cover and support if needed. But this is your operation, Peshlakai. Your hunt. Jack nodded once. Thank you, sir. That night, Jack prepared his equipment with ritual care. His rifle cleaned and checked until every part functioned perfectly. His ammunition selected from batches he'd personally tested for consistency. 30 rounds. More than he'd need, but better to have excess than shortage. His ghillie suit assembled from local vegetation and burlap. Not official issue. Something he'd made himself, learned from his grandfather's teachings about camouflage. The Army called it fieldcraft. His grandfather called it becoming invisible. His field kit, water, rations, notebook, compass, binoculars, scope lens cloth, cleaning rod, oil, everything he might need for extended operations in the field, and his grandfather's medicine pouch, small leather bag containing sacred items, a piece of turquoise, an eagle feather, dirt from the reservation. Not superstition, Jack told himself. Just connection. Reminder of who he was, where he came from, what he carried with him. Lieutenant Brooks found him in the dark. Brooks was young, barely 22, fresh from officer candidate school. He'd been assigned to work with Jack, coordinate support, make sure the sniper had what he needed. Brooks sat down on an ammunition crate, watching Jack work. Captain says you're going after their entire officer corps. Yes, sir. That's ambitious. It's necessary. Brooks was quiet for a moment. Then hesitantly, the men say you're the best shot in the division, maybe in the whole Army. Is that true? Jack didn't look up from checking his rifle's action. I don't miss. Never. Not since I was 12 years old. Brooks absorbed that. The Germans you're hunting, they don't know you exist, do they? They don't know someone's marked them. Jack looked up, his eyes reflecting the dim lantern light. They know now. They laughed. They mocked. They dismissed. Now they'll learn what it costs to underestimate someone whose people have been surviving through hunting for 10,000 years. The next morning, November 3rd, Jack moved into position before dawn. He'd selected his hunting ground carefully. A ridge overlooking the German sector, densely forested with multiple fallback positions and escape routes. A place where he could observe without being observed. Where he could disappear if discovered. He built his hide meticulously. Not dug into the ground where disturbed earth would be visible. Instead, constructed behind a fallen log, beneath overhanging branches, using natural features to break up his outline. His ghillie suit blended perfectly with the surrounding vegetation. Unless someone walked within 5 feet and looked directly at him, he was invisible. Through his scope, he watched the German positions come alive with morning routine. Soldiers emerging from bunkers, smoking, talking, beginning the day's duties. Officers making their rounds, inspecting positions, checking on their men. Hauptmann Steiner appeared at 0700 hours. Same time as yesterday, same routine. Walking from his sleeping bunker to the command post. Alone, confident, unguarded. Jack tracked him through the scope. Noted the distance. 760 meters. Wind was calm, barely a breeze. Temperature cold. Approximately 35 degrees. The conditions were perfect. He could take the shot now. Easy shot. Center mass heart. Instant death. But he held back. Because the first shot needed to send a message. Needed to be perfect in a way that communicated skill, not luck. Needed to make the Germans understand they were dealing with something they'd never encountered. Steiner entered the command post. Jack watched, waited. 30 minutes later, Steiner emerged with Oberleutnant Braun and Lieutenant Fischer. They walked together toward the forward positions, discussing something, gesturing, pointing. They stopped at an overlook position, all three visible standing in a cluster, making themselves targets that any competent marksman would take. But Jack wasn't any marksman. He wasn't going to waste this opportunity on a quick kill. He was going to make them remember. He adjusted his scope, compensating for the slight downward angle. Calculated wind, distance, bullet drop. Then he aimed, not at their bodies, at the binoculars hanging from Steiner's neck. The M1 Garand's trigger had been worked by a division armorer, reduced to a crisp 3-pound pull. Jack's finger rested on it, applying pressure slowly, steadily. His breath held. His heart rate slowed through practiced control. The rifle cracked. The recoil pressed into his shoulder. Through the scope, he watched. The binoculars exploded, shattered glass and bent metal flying from Steiner's chest. The Hauptmann fell backward, not hit by the bullet but knocked down by the impact against the binoculars, his hand clutching his chest where massive bruising would form. Braun and Fischer dove for cover, shouting, scrambling. Steiner rolled behind a rock, his face pale with shock and terror. Jack watched them panic. Watched them understand that someone had just shot the binoculars off Steiner's chest from 700 meters away. That if the shooter had aimed 6 inches higher, Steiner would be dead. That this wasn't a lucky shot. This was a message: you're not safe, you're being hunted. And the hunter doesn't miss. Jack chambered another round. The M1's action was smooth, well-oiled. He could take another shot now, could finish Steiner while he was stunned and vulnerable. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was fear. He packed up his position quickly, efficiently, and moved, a quarter-mile east to his secondary position. By the time German soldiers reached his first position, he'd be gone. Nothing left but some disturbed vegetation that might be noticed, might not. Through the new scope position, he watched as German troops swarmed the area where he'd been. Watched them search, find nothing, grow frustrated. Watched as Steiner was helped back to the command post, his chest bruised but alive, his face showing something Jack had rarely seen in German officers: fear. That afternoon, Jack wrote in his notebook, November 3rd, 14:45 hours. Target 1 warned. Officers alerted. Next phase begins tomorrow. In the German command post, Hauptmann Steiner sat bare-chested while the medic examined his chest. The bruising was spectacular, purple and black spreading across his entire sternum where the binoculars had taken the bullet's impact. If he hadn't been wearing them, if the bullet had struck flesh, his chest would have exploded. Major Hoffman stood nearby, arms crossed, face grim. You're saying someone shot your binoculars off your chest from 700 meters away? Steiner nodded, wincing as the medic probed the bruising. Herr Major, I know how it sounds, but I felt the bullet hit the binoculars, felt the impact, saw them shatter. This wasn't random fire, this was precise, deliberate. Braun spoke up, his voice tight. I was standing right beside him. I saw it happen. 1 second the Hauptmann is fine. The next his binoculars explode and he's on the ground. 1 shot. Nothing before, nothing after. 1 perfect shot that could have killed him but didn't. Hoffman walked to the window, looked out at the forested ridges in the distance. You think it's the Indian, the one you were mocking yesterday? Steiner's silence was answer enough. Hoffman turned back, his expression hard. If this is true, if we have a marksman of that caliber operating against us, then we have a serious problem. That's not a standard American rifleman. That's someone special. Someone trained. Lieutenant Fischer, young and nervous, spoke hesitantly. Sir, what do we do? Hoffman considered. We increase security. Officers travel in pairs minimum. No unnecessary exposure. We rotate routes, randomize timing. We make ourselves hard targets. And we get our own snipers up here to countersnipe. If there's 1 American marksman, we have him outnumbered. What Hoffman didn't understand, what none of them could understand, was that Jack Peshlakai wasn't operating under the same constraints as their snipers. German snipers needed support, needed spotters, needed extraction plans and backup. Jack needed nothing but his rifle, his knowledge and patience learned in a land where mistakes meant death. November 4th dawned cold and clear. Perfect hunting weather. Jack was in position before sunrise, watching as the German positions slowly came alive. He'd moved to a completely different location. Northwest of the command post, higher elevation, longer range but better concealment. Through the scope, he watched German officers emerge with new caution. They moved quickly, stayed in cover, didn't linger in exposed positions. They'd learned from yesterday, had adapted, but adaptation requires knowing what you're adapting to, and they didn't understand what they were facing. At 0800 hours, Oberleutnant Werner Braun emerged from his bunker. He was careful, moving in quick dashes between cover, but he had to cross an open area. 15 meters of exposure between his sleeping bunker and the command post. 15 meters that he'd crossed every morning for 2 weeks. He paused at the edge of cover, looking around. Then he ran. Fast, low, zigzagging. Jack had been tracking him since he emerged, had predicted the route, calculated the lead. His rifle was already aimed at the spot where Braun would be in exactly 3 seconds. 1 second. Braun running. 2 seconds. Jack's finger on the trigger. 3 seconds. The rifle cracked. Braun went down hard. The bullet struck him in the upper thigh, shattering the femur, his artery intact but the bone destroyed. He screamed, a raw sound of shock and pain, hands clutching his leg as blood pumped between his fingers. German soldiers rushed to him, dragging him to cover while others fired randomly at the tree line. Hundreds of rounds expended without a target, bullets chewing up trees and dirt in every direction except the one where Jack lay perfectly still, perfectly concealed. The medics worked on Braun in the command post. The wound was bad but survivable. The bullet had missed the femoral artery by centimeters, but Braun would never walk normally again. Would be evacuated, sent to a hospital removed from the war. 1 down, 6 to go. Jack moved again. Different position, different angle, always moving. His grandfather had taught him that a successful hunter never returns to the same kill site. The prey learns. The prey adapts. Only by constant movement, by refusing to establish patterns, can the hunter stay invisible. That night, German command brought in Feldwebel Hans Kruger, their best sniper. Kruger had 87 confirmed kills on the Eastern Front, had survived 2 years of counter-sniper duels against Soviet marksmen who were themselves legendary. He arrived with his spotter, Obergefreiter Emil Strauss, and immediately began analyzing the situation. Kruger studied the positions where Jack had fired from, looked at angles, distances, sight lines. He found Jack's first position on the ridge, examined the disturbed vegetation, the slight depression where Jack had lain. Found nothing useful, no shell casings, no equipment, no patterns. He spoke to Major Hauptmann that night, his voice thoughtful. Herr Major, whoever this is, they're not standard military. The positioning is expert. The concealment is near perfect. The discipline is exceptional. They're not firing multiple shots. They're not getting drawn into engagements. They're hunting. Patient, methodical hunting. Hoffman asked the obvious question. Can you stop them? Kruger was honest. I don't know. On the Eastern Front, snipers operated with patterns. Favorite positions, preferred ranges, reliable tactics. This one has no pattern yet. Or the pattern is randomness itself. Give me time. Let them make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes eventually. But Jack Peshlakai hadn't made a mistake since he was 12 years old. November 5th. Jack changed tactics again. Instead of long-range precision shots, he moved closer. Much closer. To positions within 300 meters of German lines. Positions that were insane by conventional sniper standards. Too close, too dangerous. Too little room for error or escape. But close range meant certain shots, meant he could see his targets clearly, read their body language, understand their intentions before they acted. At noon, Lieutenant Otto Kessler emerged from a forward bunker to inspect his platoon positions. He was careful, wearing a helmet, staying low. But he had to move, had to check on his men, had to perform his duties. Jack was lying in a depression 280 meters away. So close he could hear German voices, hear them talking, joking, trying to maintain morale despite the fear spreading through the unit. Close enough that if they'd swept this area with patrols, they might have found him. But they hadn't. Because Jack had entered this position in darkness, moved 100 meters in 4 hours, inch by inch, patience measured in breaths. He'd become part of the landscape, indistinguishable from the rocks and dead logs around him. Kessler walked along the trench line. Jack tracked him, waited, watched for the perfect moment when Kessler would stop, would be still long enough for a guaranteed hit. It came. Kessler stopped to light a cigarette, cupped his hands around the match, his head tilted down, his helmet's rim creating a gap that exposed his neck. Jack's shot was perfect. The bullet entered beneath the helmet's edge, severed the spine, Instant death. Kessler collapsed without a sound beyond the impact. His soldiers didn't realize he was dead for several seconds, thought he'd tripped. Then they saw the blood. 2 down, 5 to go. The panic in the German unit was immediate and visceral. Officers started refusing to leave bunkers. Routines that had been predictable for weeks suddenly changed. Patrols were canceled. Inspections stopped. The command structure was paralyzed by fear. But paralyzed command meant weakened defense. Meant opportunities for American forces to probe, to gather intelligence, to prepare for offensive operations. Captain Harrison reported to Division, German activity in Sector 7 has decreased by 60%. Officer visibility is near zero. Enemy appears to be experiencing significant command disruption. Division wanted to know why. Harrison's answer was simple. Private Peshlakai. November 6th. Feldwebel Kruger had been watching, studying, trying to find patterns. He'd identified 2 likely positions Jack might use. Set up watch on both with his spotter. Waited. Jack used a 3rd position they hadn't considered. An abandoned German observation post that had been damaged by artillery weeks ago. The Germans had written it off as unusable. Jack had entered it at night, cleared the debris silently, and turned it into a perfect hide with commanding views of the entire sector. From this position, he could see Kruger and Strauss watching the wrong areas, could see their frustration as hours passed with no activity. At 1500 hours, Hauptmann Henrik Wolf emerged from the battalion command bunker. Wolf commanded the artillery battalion supporting this sector. He'd been ordered to the front to coordinate fire support for a planned counterattack. He was careful, moved quickly, had 4 guards with him. Jack watched them approach. Calculated. The guards were positioned to protect against ground-level threats. They weren't looking up at abandoned structures, weren't watching the one position that logic said was impossible to occupy. Jack aimed, not at Wolf. At the guard on Wolf's right, the shot would pass within inches of Wolf's head, would kill the guard, would send the message that Wolf wasn't the target yet, that he was being toyed with. The rifle cracked. The guard's head snapped back. Wolf felt the bullet's passage, felt the air move as death passed within 4 inches of his skull, felt the guard's blood spray across his uniform. Wolf and his remaining guards dove for cover, screaming into radios, calling for help. German soldiers poured out of bunkers, searching, firing at nothing. Jack packed up calmly, moved through the structure's rear exit, was 200 meters away before they even reached the observation post. By the time they searched it, found his position, understood how he'd operated right under their noses, he was back behind American lines. 3 down, 4 to go. That night, the remaining German officers gathered in the deep bunker. Major Hoffmann, Hauptmann Steiner, Hauptmann Wolf, Lieutenant Fischer. 4 men who'd commanded with confidence now huddled in a room 15 feet underground, afraid to emerge. Wolf was shaking, not from cold, from the memory of that bullet passing his head. The sound of it. The wet impact as it struck his guard. The realization that the shooter could have killed him as easily as breathing, but chose not to. Fischer was the youngest, barely 24. He'd been promoted to replace an officer killed in Normandy. Now he was discovering what command meant when someone skilled and patient wanted you dead. He spoke, his voice thin. How is this possible? 1 man, 1 American with a rifle. We have an entire battalion. We have Feldwebel Kruger, our best sniper. How are we losing? Steiner's response was bitter. We're losing because we underestimated him. Because we laughed. Because we assumed an Indian with a rifle was primitive, was inferior. We were wrong. We were fools. And now we're paying the price. Hoffman studied the map, marked the positions where shots had been taken, looked for patterns, found none. Each position was different. Different range, different angle, different terrain. The only pattern was unpredictability itself. He's eliminating us systematically. Not randomly, not opportunistically, systematically. Like he's working from a list. Like this is a planned operation, not just target shooting. Wolf looked up. We could request transfer, rotation to another sector. Get out of his range. Hoffman shook his head. And tell Division what? That we're abandoning our post because we're afraid of 1 sniper? That 4 German officers are hiding from 1 American? They'd never understand. would think we're cowards or incompetent. The truth that none of them wanted to speak was worse. They were afraid. Not the ordinary fear of combat that every soldier carries. Deep, primal fear of being hunted, of knowing that invisible eyes are watching. That death could arrive without warning from any direction at any moment. That all their training, all their experience, all their military power meant nothing against someone who refused to fight by their rules. Fisher asked the question they were all thinking. What if we just stay here? Underground. Don't emerge. Don't give him targets. Eventually, he'll have to give up, move on. Hoffman's laugh was hollow. And then what? We command from a hole? Never inspect positions? Never coordinate operations? Never do our jobs? He's already won if that's our strategy. He's already defeated us without killing us. Steiner stood, paced. His chest still ached where the binoculars had taken the bullet. There's another option. We go hunting for him. Active patrols, aggressive sweeps. Force him to displace, to react. Maybe he makes a mistake. Kruger, who'd been listening silently, finally spoke. That won't work. I've seen his positions. He's never in the same place twice, moves constantly. And he's good at picking positions with multiple escape routes. Send patrols, you'll just give him more targets and lose more men. Hoffman made a decision. We rotate command. Officers will switch bunkers every 6 hours. Random patterns, different routes. We make ourselves unpredictable. We survive until division sends support. Armor, maybe. Artillery saturation. Something to flush him out. What they didn't know was that Jack was already anticipating this, had watched them long enough to understand how they thought, how they'd react, had already planned the next 3 shots based on their likely adjustments. November 7th. Jack took the day off, didn't fire a shot, didn't even take position. He stayed behind American lines, cleaned his rifle, rested, ate hot food, slept for the first time in 4 days. Lieutenant Brooks found him in the afternoon. Peshlakai, you okay? No activity today. Jack looked up from his rifle maintenance. Hunters need rest too. Body needs recovery. Mind needs clarity. Push too hard. You make mistakes. I don't make mistakes. Brooks sat down. The Germans are terrified. Division intelligence intercepted radio traffic. They're calling you Der Geist, the ghost. They think you're supernatural. Jack smiled slightly. Not supernatural, just patient. Just trained by people who knew that survival meant being better at hunting than what's hunting you. You're going back out tomorrow? Tomorrow or the next day, let them wonder. Let them think maybe I'm gone. Let them relax, get careless. Fear is useful, but too much fear makes them hide. I need them to think it's safe to emerge. Then I finish the work. Brooks shook his head in amazement. You're not just hunting them. You're playing with them. Psychological warfare. My grandfather taught me that the best hunt doesn't just take the game. It teaches the herd. After I'm done here, every German officer in this sector will remember, will think twice before mocking someone they don't understand. That night, the German officers cautiously emerged from their bunker. Jack's silence had given them hope. Maybe he was gone. Maybe he'd been transferred. Maybe the threat was over. Major Hoffmann decided to inspect the forward positions. Something he hadn't done in 3 days. He was careful, moved at night, took a circuitous route, but he was visible, exposed. Jack wasn't there to see it, was asleep in his tent, recovering. But other American soldiers were watching, reporting, building intelligence that Jack would use when he returned. November 8th. Jack returned to the field, fresh, rested, his mind clear and focused. He'd selected a new position, a drainage culvert 400 meters from the German lines. Partially flooded, uncomfortable, cold. A position no sane sniper would use, which made it perfect. Through his scope, he watched morning routines resume. The Germans were moving more freely now, hoping that Jack's silence meant departure. Hoffmann emerged at 0700 walking with Hauptmann Wolf toward an artillery observation post. Jack tracked them. Let them walk. Watch their body language relax as no shot came. Watch them start to believe they were safe. Then when they were 600 meters out, fully exposed on open ground, he took the shot. Not at Hoffmann. At Wolf. The bullet struck high on the left shoulder. Not fatal. Deliberately not fatal. Wolf went down screaming. Hoffmann dove for cover, dragging the wounded officer with him. German soldiers rushed to help. Jack watched them administer first aid, evacuate Wolf on a stretcher, watched Hoffmann's face through the scope, saw the realization there, the understanding that the ghost was back, that the silence had been tactical, that they'd never be safe. 4 down, 3 to go. Kruger watched this from his position 800 meters away. He'd finally spotted the muzzle flash, finally had a location. He signaled to his spotter, and they moved quickly toward the drainage culvert. But when they arrived, Jack was gone, moved out the back of the culvert, through water that left no tracks, into heavy brush that swallowed him completely. Kruger found the position, found evidence that someone had been there, spent 20 minutes searching the immediate area. Jack watched him from 150 meters away, watched the famous German sniper search fruitlessly, watched him grow frustrated. Jack could have taken the shot, could have killed Kruger easily, but that wasn't the mission. The mission was officers, and more than that, the mission was the lesson. Kruger eventually returned to German lines. Jack watched him report to Hoffmann, watched the defeat in their body language as they realized they were dealing with someone who operated on a completely different level. November 9th. Hauptmann Friedrich Steiner made a decision. He would not hide, would not cower. He'd fought across Europe, survived the Eastern Front, earned his rank through courage under fire. He wouldn't let one Indian with a rifle reduce him to a terrified rabbit. At dawn, he emerged from his bunker, walked openly across the compound, performed his duties visibly, deliberately, daring Jack to take the shot. Jack watched from 900 meters away, admired the courage even as he prepared to end it. Steiner was brave, foolish, but brave, and courage without wisdom was just another form of weakness. But Jack held back. Not from mercy, from strategy. Steiner's open defiance was drawing other officers out. Fischer emerged to accompany Steiner, then Hoffmann. 3 targets visible simultaneously. Jack aimed at Fischer, the youngest, the most junior, the one whose death would hurt morale more than command effectiveness. The shot was the longest he'd attempted this week. 900 meters, slight crosswind, cold air increasing air density and bullet trajectory. He compensated for all of it. The bullet struck Fischer in the chest. Center mass. Heart shot. Instant death. The lieutenant collapsed without a sound. Steiner and Hoffmann dove for cover, screaming orders. 5 down, 2 to go. Fischer's death broke something in the German command. He'd been popular, young, optimistic, the kind of officer soldiers followed because they believed in him. His death wasn't just a tactical loss. It was a psychological blow that rippled through the entire battalion. German morale collapsed. Soldiers started refusing to leave bunkers. Patrols were reduced to skeleton crews. The defense posture of the entire sector weakened to the point where American intelligence noted it, wondered what was causing such drastic changes. The answer: one Apache Marksman with patience measured in generations. November 10th. Major Klaus Hoffmann sat alone in his bunker. Hauptmann Steiner had been evacuated that morning. Not wounded. Broken. Combat fatigue, they called it. Shell shock. Whatever the name, Steiner couldn't fight anymore, couldn't command, could barely speak without trembling. Hoffmann was the last senior officer in the sector, the only major still standing. He wrote a report to division headquarters, detailed everything, the systematic elimination of his officer corps, the terror spreading through the ranks, the paralysis of command. Division's response came that afternoon. Hold position, reinforcements en route, counter-sniper team being deployed. But Hoffmann knew the truth. Reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. The counter-sniper team wouldn't be better than Kruger, who'd already failed. He was alone, marked, and it was only a matter of time. He made a decision then. A decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life but seemed like the only rational choice. He would surrender. Not the battalion. Just himself. Remove himself as a target. Save his life by abandoning his post. That night, under cover of darkness, Major Klaus Hoffmann walked across no man's land with a white flag. American sentries almost shot him before recognizing the flag. They brought him in, confused, suspicious. Captain Harrison interviewed him. Hauptmann spoke in broken English, exhausted and defeated. I am Major Klaus Hauptmann, Wehrmacht. I surrender. I will provide intelligence. I will cooperate. I only ask, please keep me away from the Apache sniper. Please. Harrison was stunned. You're surrendering because of Private Peshlakai? Hauptmann looked at him with hollow eyes. Your sniper. He destroyed my entire command. 7 officers. 5 dead or wounded. 2 evacuated. He hunted us like we were animals. Like we were nothing. We had no defense. No counter. He was invisible, patient, and perfect. I have fought for 3 years. Survived Stalingrad. Survived Normandy. But I cannot survive being hunted by a man who has been hunting since before I was born. By a man whose people survived by being better hunters than everything that wanted to kill them. Harrison called Jack in. The young Apache entered quietly, looked at Hauptmann with no expression. Hauptmann stared at him. Younger than expected. Smaller. Unassuming. This was the ghost who'd terrorized an entire battalion? This quiet soldier who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else? Jack spoke, his voice soft. You laughed at me. You called me savage. You said I was primitive. Hauptmann nodded slowly. I was wrong. I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. You are not primitive. You are something we have forgotten how to be. You are what soldiers were before we had artillery and tanks and airplanes. You are a pure warrior, and I have no defense against that. Jack looked at Harrison. Sir, am I done? Is the mission complete? Harrison checked his notes. 7 German officers. 5 confirmed eliminated. 1 surrendered. 1 evacuated. Yes, Private. The mission is complete. You did exactly what you said you'd do. 1 week. Jack nodded. Then I'd like to go home now, sir. I mean back to my tent. I'm tired. In the days that followed, American forces moved into the German sector with minimal resistance. The Wehrmacht battalion, leaderless and demoralized, either retreated or surrendered. The sector that had been a stalemate for weeks fell in 3 days. Division wanted to know how. The answer was always the same. Private Peshlakai. The army tried to give Jack medals. He declined. Tried to promote him. He accepted only because refusal would have been complicated. But he didn't want recognition. Didn't want fame. Just wanted to do his job and survive to go home. The story spread anyway. Through the division, through the Corps, through the entire American army in Europe. The Apache Marksman who'd eliminated an entire German officer corps in 1 week. Who'd hunted them like deer. Who'd demonstrated that sometimes the oldest skills, refined over generations, were still the most effective. German intelligence issued warnings. Descriptions of Jack, though they got most details wrong. Warnings about Native American snipers. Instructions to avoid mockery, avoid underestimation, avoid giving them targets. But the damage was done. The lesson was taught. American commanders started requesting Native American soldiers specifically. Started understanding that the skills learned on harsh land, the patience learned through necessity, the knowledge passed down through generations, had value that no military training could replicate. Jack Peshlakai continued fighting through the end of the war, took part in the drive into Germany, was present when his unit helped liberate a concentration camp, saw horrors that made combat seem clean by comparison, survived until WWII Day, and returned home in September 1945. He never spoke about his service, not to his family, not to his children, not even to other veterans. The Army credited him with 127 confirmed kills. He never confirmed or denied the number, just returned to the reservation, resumed hunting, lived quietly. In 1982, a military historian found him, wanted to interview him about his sniper work, write a book, make him famous. Jack declined politely but firmly. When the historian persisted, Jack finally explained, "What I did in the war was hunting. Same as hunting deer or elk, just different game. You don't brag about hunting. You don't make it entertainment. You respect what you kill, take only what you need, waste nothing. Those German officers I marked, I didn't hate them. Didn't take pleasure in their deaths. They needed to be removed so my people could survive. So my friends could live. That's all. Making it a story, making it entertainment, dishonors them and dishonors the act. It was necessary. It was war. That's all it was. The historian left, never wrote the book, but he told others what Jack had said. And slowly, the story spread anyway, not as entertainment, not as glorification, but as history, as truth, as lesson. The lesson that Hauptmann Friedrich Steiner learned too late. That mockery of people you don't understand is more than rude. It's tactical error. It's strategic blindness. It's the mistake of assuming that your way is the only way, that your knowledge is the only knowledge, that technology replaces wisdom. Steiner survived the war, returned to Germany, became a teacher. In 1967, he was interviewed by a German television program about his experiences. The interviewer asked about his most important lesson from the war. Steiner's answer was recorded, translated, preserved. I learned that respect is not just moral virtue. It is survival necessity. In 1944, I laughed at an Apache soldier. I called him savage. I mocked his skills. 1 week later, my entire command was destroyed. 7 officers eliminated by 1 man with a rifle. Not through luck, not through random chance. Through skill refined over generations, through patience learned from land that kills the impatient, through knowledge that predates what we call civilization. That man was not primitive. We were primitive. We with our technology and our tactics and our arrogance. He was advanced. Advanced in ways we'd forgotten. In ways our industrial war made us forget. The ability to wait, to watch, to become invisible, to hunt with absolute precision. These are skills that require intelligence, training, and discipline far exceeding what I possessed. If I could speak to him now, I would apologize. I would thank him for the lesson that came at terrible cost to my men, but that I needed to learn, that we all needed to learn, that there is wisdom in traditions we dismiss, that there is power in patience we've lost, that underestimating someone because they're different is the greatest military blunder you can make. Jack Peshlakai died in 1998 at age 77. His funeral was attended by family, friends, and a handful of veterans who knew what he'd done. No military honors, no news coverage, just quiet burial in the cemetery near his childhood home. But his legacy lived on. In military training programs that studied his tactics, in special forces schools that taught patience and fieldcraft, in Native American communities that told his story to young people considering military service, in the understanding that sometimes the oldest ways are still the best ways. That technology doesn't replace wisdom. That respect for knowledge, regardless of its source, is not just courtesy, but necessity. And in the memories of soldiers who served with him, who watched him work, who saw what he could do, who understood that they'd witnessed something rare and valuable, something that connected ancient knowledge with modern war and demonstrated that the bridge between them was not just possible, but powerful. The German officers who laughed at the Apache Marksman learned their lesson too late. 7 men marked, 5 eliminated, 1 surrendered, 1 evacuated, all within 1 week. The mathematics of mockery calculated in bodies in broken command. But beyond the numbers, beyond the tactical success, beyond the military analysis, there was something more profound. A demonstration that knowledge passed through generations, refined through necessity, tested by survival itself, had value that could not be measured in modern terms but could absolutely be measured in results. Jack Peshlakai proved that. Quietly, efficiently, without drama or bravado. Just did the work, did it perfectly, and went home. The way his grandfather taught him. The way his ancestors survived. The way warriors had always survived when they remembered that patience, knowledge, and respect for the land were the ultimate weapons. The Germans laughed at the Apache Marksman. Then, an entire patrol disappeared overnight. Officers fell without warning and fear replaced mockery. 1 week, 12 officers marked. 7 missions, 7 lessons. One truth that echoed through military history. Never underestimate someone whose people survive by being better hunters than anything hunting them. Never mock skills you don't understand. Never forget that the oldest knowledge, when wielded by someone who truly understands it, remains the deadliest weapon of all, the ghost of the Vosges. That's what the Germans called him, Der Geist. The spirit that moved without sound, struck without warning, taught lessons that couldn't be unlearned. But to his people, to those who knew him, Jack Peshlakai was just a hunter who'd applied his skills to a different kind of game, who'd demonstrated that his grandfather's teachings had value far beyond the reservation, who'd shown the world that patience, knowledge, and respect were not primitive virtues but timeless ones, and in doing so, ensured that no one would laugh at an Apache marksman ever again.